Okay, so picture this. You're at the mall, just kind of window shopping, and then this like really charismatic guy, he comes up to you out of nowhere. And he's like, you've got the look, like you could be a star. And then he offers you a chance to be like the next Bond girl. Sounds amazing, right? Well, for Christy Johnson, this was back in 2003. That dream, it turned into like a total nightmare.
Yeah, it's like that classic Hollywood story we all know. But this one has a really dark twist. I think what makes this case so fascinating is it's all these like seemingly random events. And I don't know, maybe a little bit of fate too. But it all comes together and helps solve this really complex mystery.
It's like ripped straight from a detective novel or something. So this deep dive, it's taking us into Murder in the Hollywood Hills. It's a Dateline podcast.
Yeah.
And it like chronicles this whole story of Christie's disappearance and the crazy path that led detectives to their prime suspect. We're going to be going through police records, witness testimonies, forensic evidence, the whole 9 yards, just trying to figure out how this young woman who had these big Hollywood dreams, how she just vanished, like without a trace.
And it's important to remember that even though this case is set against, this backdrop of all the Hollywood glitz and glamour, it really speaks to something much darker, the vulnerabilities that a lot of people face, especially young people who are chasing their dreams in a city that's known for both, the bright lights and the dark shadows.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a reminder that things aren't always what they seem,
Yeah.
So let's go back to the beginning. Christy Johnson, she was an aspiring actress, and she disappeared after telling her roommate that she was, meeting someone about a modeling opportunity. This, like, little detail, it would become super important later on. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Christy was last seen wearing a very specific outfit. It was a long-sleeve white shirt, a tie, a short black miniskirt, nylons, and black stiletto heels. It's a very particular look.
Yeah.
And it's going to come back in a big way, trust me.
Yeah, at first, the lack of leads in Chrissy's case, it was a huge problem for investigators. Her disappearance, it had all the signs of, a possible abduction. And as days turned into weeks, the fear that, she might not be found alive, it just kept growing stronger.
And to make things even more mysterious, it was like Christy had just vanished into thin air. There were no signs of a struggle, no witnesses, no obvious motive. The case just seemed to be at a standstill. Until a few weeks later, when this woman named Susan Murphy, she came forward. She said she'd been approached by a man at the same mall where Christy was last seen. And get this, he was also offering a Bond girl opportunity.
Wow. So Susan Murphy's encounter, that was a major turning point in the case because she was able to provide a pretty detailed description of the guy. And she even mentioned the location where he wanted to meet her. And that detail turned out to be like super valuable to the investigation.
It's crazy, right? And this is where I think that element of, I don't know, maybe fate, maybe just pure luck. This is where it comes in. A parole officer. She was looking at the suspect sketch, right? The one based on Susan's description. And she recognized the guy as one of her parolees, a guy named Victor Paleologos.
No way.
Yeah.
And what's even more wild is that Paleologos, he was already in custody for a totally unrelated charge. It was a grand theft auto case involving a BMW. So this random arrest, it basically led detectives right to their prime suspect in Christy's disappearance.
I know, right? Talk about a coincidence. It was like a total stroke of luck, and it completely changed the direction of the whole investigation. Now, I bet you're thinking, how could someone who's facing like a car theft charge be connected to a missing persons case, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what Detective Virginia Obenchain, she wanted to find out.
So Detective Obenchain's investigation of Paleologos, I mean, it's really like a textbook example of good, thorough police work. She started by looking into his apartment, and it turned out his apartment was really close to the spot where Susan Murphy had her encounter, with that whole Bond girl proposition. So that proximity, it immediately raised red flags.
Right. It makes you wonder. And then there was this, like, bombshell discovery. Detectives, they searched Paleologos' apartment, and they found his laptop. And guess what was on that laptop?
Oh, man, I don't even want to know.
Well, let's just say it sent chills down their spines.
Okay, so what was it?
All right, so the laptop, it had all these photographs on it.
Okay.
And
what kind of photographs?
Well, Detective Obenchain, she described them as soft pea shots.
Oh, wow.
And they showed women
wearing
the exact same outfit that Christy was last seen in. You remember? The long-sleeve white shirt, the tie, the miniskirt, the nylons, and the heels.
Wow, it's like all the pieces of the puzzle are starting to fall into place.
Right.
But I guess the problem is, even with these pictures, even with everything you've said, there's still no physical evidence directly linking Christy to Paleologos or to his apartment.
You're telling me
Mhm.
That was a major problem for the investigation
Yeah.
because they couldn't definitively prove
Yeah.
that Christy had ever actually been.
In Paleologus's presence. Yeah, that lack of physical evidence. It was a huge obstacle for the prosecution because they couldn't, like, concretely prove that Christy had ever been in Paleologus's presence. So, the investigation. It basically became this game of strategy, like a psychological chess match.
And Paleologus, whether it was out of panic or, like, arrogance,
Yeah.
he kind of played right into their hands. He actually tried to escape custody.
Really?
Yeah.
How?
He offered other inmates $5,000
Ugh.
to switch wristbands with him. Remember, at this point, he's officially only in jail for stealing a car.
Oh, wow. So his attempted escape, that was a huge red flag because it suggested that he was hiding something way more serious than just, stealing a car. It's like his desperation. It was ultimately going to be his downfall.
Okay, so picture this. They arrange a live lineup. They bring in Susan Murphy and her boyfriend so they can try to identify the guy who approached her with that whole Bond girl offer. Now, Paleologus, he tries to be slick. He tries to change his appearance. He, flattens his hair. He's making all these weird faces.
Oh, man. It's not going to work.
I know, right?
So what happened?
Well, despite all his efforts, Susan and her boyfriend, they both positively identified Paleologus without any hesitation.
Wow.
It was a big moment for the case.
Yeah.
Because it really solidified his connection to everything that happened around Christie's disappearance. And just as this lineup was ending, some breaking news came in. Hikers had stumbled upon a woman's body in the Hollywood Hills. And now the race was on to identify the remains and figure out if there was any connection to the missing Christy Johnson.
Oh, man. This is getting intense.
I know, right?
So finding that body in the Hollywood Hills, it was a pretty grim turning point in the case,
Yeah, it was. It reminded everyone that even in a city like L.A. with all the glitz and glamour, there's still a dark side.
Yeah.
And it felt like, I don't know, a punch to the gut,
Yeah, for sure. It was a really somber moment. And the location, too, The Hollywood Hills, it's rugged, unforgiving terrain. It just added to this feeling of, isolation, vulnerability.
Right. And this is where we meet Detective Virginia Obenchain. This woman is amazing. She's tasked with examining the scene, which means she has to climb down this, steep, muddy hillside. And get this, she's terrified of heights.
Oh, wow. I can't even imagine.
I know, right?
That just shows her dedication to the case. Facing her own fears just to get to the truth. It's like a testament to the hard work of all those people behind the scenes who are trying to bring justice to victims like Christy.
I agree. She's a true hero in this story. So, despite how decomposed the body was, investigators quickly noticed a tattoo. It was on her lower back, a delicate, scrolling, purplish hibiscus, and it matched the tattoo Christy had. And remember that unique outfit I mentioned? The body was found wearing the same nylons and stiletto heels, although the miniskirt and shirt were missing.
Wow, so those details, along with dental records, that confirmed the heartbreaking truth. The body in the Hollywood Hills, it was Christy Johnson. It was just devastating for her family and friends, and it really just highlighted the brutality of this crime.
It's awful. And at that point, the focus of the case shifted from finding Christy to finding her killer and bringing them to justice. So the autopsy. It revealed that Christy's life had ended brutally. Her hands were bound, her ankles were tied together. There was even a scuff mark on one of her stilettos. Like her body had been dragged. The cause of death was strangulation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they could tell because her hyoid bone was crushed.
And was there anything else?
Yeah, there's something even more chilling. The autopsy also showed that she had a skull fracture, probably from a blow to the head. So all of that suggested a violent struggle and raised the horrifying possibility that Christy was still alive when her body was dumped in those hills.
Oh, it's just awful.
I know. So let's just recap for a second. We have this suspect, Paleologus, who has a history of approaching women. With this whole Bond girl scheme, we have his laptop, with photos of women wearing the exact same outfit that Christy was last seen in. And now we have confirmation that Christy was brutally murdered. It seems like it should be an open and shut case, right?
Right, you would think so. But there's a catch. Even with all of that, all those connections, there was still no physical evidence directly linking Paleologus to the murder. Those heavy rains we talked about. They washed away any potential DNA evidence at the crime scene. And they never found any trace of Christy in Paleologus's apartment or his stuff.
Oh, man, it's so frustrating. It's like, just when you think they've got him, this lack of physical evidence throws a wrench in everything.
Exactly. But just when it seemed like the case was hitting a dead end, this, crazy new piece of the puzzle emerged. This actress, Kathy Giano, she saw Paleologos' photo on the news, and she contacted the police. She recognized him as the man who approached her at the Century City Mall years earlier, using the same Bond girl line.
It's incredible how these things happen, right? Like, what are the chances that another woman, years later, would recognize this guy and come forward?
It's amazing. It just shows the power of media attention. And maybe, maybe it's a subconscious desire to help, to bring justice to someone like Christy. But anyway, Kathy Giano's testimony, it brought a whole new dimension to the case because it established a pattern of behavior. It showed that Paleologos had been using this Bond girl scheme to target women for years.
Right. So Kathy's experience, it was similar to what Christy and Susan went through. You approached her at the mall, complimented her appearance, and offered her a bunch of money for a photo shoot at a private residence. And, of course, he dangled that Bond girl possibility.
Yeah, it's like the same story, different woman.
Exactly.
But what makes Kathy's story different is that she got suspicious. Unlike Christy and Susan, she didn't just, go along with it.
Right, she was smart.
Yeah, she decided to investigate the business card he gave her. And she actually got in touch with the real owner of the card and found out it was fake.
Wow, so her intuition and her, proactive approach, it probably saved her from a really dangerous situation.
Probably. I mean, it's a chilling thought, right? How easily someone can manipulate and exploit people's dreams.
It is. But Kathy, she didn't stop there. She decided to play along, and she arranged to meet Paleologos for the photo shoot. But she took a really important precaution. She brought a friend with her for protection. A stuntman, no less.
Smart move. Having that backup, that physical presence, it could have made all the difference.
For sure. So they arrive at the location, and Paleologos, he's nowhere to be found. He was probably watching them. And when he saw Kathy with another guy, he probably decided to ditch his plan.
Yeah, it's a classic predator tactic. They prey on vulnerability, isolation, and having a witness, someone there to protect you, it messes up that whole dynamic.
Absolutely. So now we have 3 women, all approached by the same guy, with the same story, all offered a chance to be a Bond girl. Yeah. 2 of these women disappear. One is found murdered, and the third barely escapes. What seems like a very dangerous encounter. The evidence against Paleologos, it's really piling up at this point.
Yeah.
But is it enough to get a conviction? Let's find out. This case has been a wild ride, hasn't it? We started with this, seemingly innocent encounter at a mall, with the promise of Hollywood stardom. And it turned into this dark and twisted story of deception and danger, and ultimately tragedy.
Yeah, it really makes you think, about the dark side that exists everywhere, even in places like Hollywood.
Exactly. So let's talk about Victor Paleologos. We've seen his Bond girl scheme. We know he tried to escape from custody, which definitely made him look guilty. But was all of that enough to actually hold him accountable for Christy Johnson's murder?
Well, that's where things get a little tricky. You see, even with all the circumstantial evidence, the photographs, the women he approached, his attempt to escape, they still didn't have that one crucial thing.
Which is?
Direct physical evidence. That linked Paleologos to the murder.
So, no fingerprints at the crime scene, no DNA evidence, nothing that put him there for sure.
Nope, nothing. Those heavy rains we talked about, they washed away any potential evidence at the site where they found Christy's body, and they searched everywhere, his apartment, his belongings, but they couldn't find anything.
Man, that's got to be frustrating for the prosecution. So what happened? Did he just walk free?
Not quite. Remember, he was already in custody for that stolen BMW.
Right.
And that whole escape attempt.
Yeah.
Offering that $5,000 bribe. It made him look super guilty. It was like he was trying to get away with something way bigger than just stealing a car.
Yeah, he had this huge secret he needed to protect.
Exactly. And then there were his prior convictions for sexual assault. You put all that together with the witness testimonies. And his Bond girl scheme, it painted a pretty damning picture.
So what happened in the end? Did Christy Johnson's family and friends finally get justice?
Well, the jury couldn't agree on a verdict.
What do you mean?
They were deadlocked.
Like a hung jury?
Yeah, exactly. It was a huge blow to everyone who wanted to see him convicted.
I can only imagine how devastating that must have been. So what happened next? Did they retry the case?
Well, faced with a hung jury and the uncertainty of a new trial, the prosecution decided to offer Paleologos a plea deal.
What kind of deal?
He could plead guilty to manslaughter.
Which is a lesser charge than murder, right?
Yeah, and in exchange, they would drop the murder charge.
So it wasn't a perfect outcome, but at least it meant that. He would be held accountable for what he did.
Exactly.
So did he take the deal?
He did. He pled guilty to manslaughter. and was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison.
Wow. So even though it might not have been the full justice that Christy's loved ones deserved, at least it means this guy's off the streets
That's right.
and he can't hurt anyone else.
It's a bittersweet victory for sure.
This whole case, it really shows how important eyewitness testimony is and how crucial it is to have a thorough investigation.
Yeah, I mean, this case, it really sticks with you.
It makes you question things.
Makes you think.
If there's one thing we can learn from all of this, it's to trust your gut. If something feels wrong, don't ignore it. Ask questions, do your research, and if you feel unsafe, walk away. Your safety is the most important thing.
Absolutely. And remember, there's help out there if you're ever in a situation that feels dangerous.
Right. There are people you can talk to and organizations that can help. If you want to learn more about this case, you can find the full Murder in the Hollywood Hills podcast on Dateline's website. It's a chilling story, but it's an important reminder that danger can exist anywhere, even in the most glamorous places. So stay safe out there, stay informed, and always trust your instincts. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.